I go into this business, I build it from a $3 to $60 million business, no credit line, no cash infusion, grinding.
Customers don't give a shit about that stuff. You've got to do what's right for the customer. You can't be worried first and foremost about your business model or your suppliers or how you allocate your internal resources for political reasons.
Entrepreneurship had given. It was making me stronger, bigger, faster. And now it was beginning to take away because I didn't care about the product. I didn't love what we were doing. I wasn't passionate. I was just chasing money and money just wasn't that interesting.
The first 3 years of running this business from my living room, Sephora and Ulta and QVC and department stores, every single one of them said no for 3 years.
Build the community first and provide value to an audience, that's the money will come.
My guest today is Gary Vee. Gary, thank you for being here, brother.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I go into this business, I build it from a $3 to $60 million business, no credit line, no cash infusion, grinding, no internet, just different. I mean, it was internet, but it was a different fucking internet than it is now. And then I leave at 34. I never pay myself more. I think 1 year there was a little over 100,000 a year. But don't forget, for an executive that took something from 3 to 60 million, the first 3, 4, 5 years were 30, 40, 50,000 ranges. I live in a $1,800 a month apartment the whole time. Right? Or at least, excuse me, until I was 29. I save up money. I then get to this place where I'm 31, 32. I realize the internet's coming. I have like 3, 4, I'm 31, 32 years old. I'm making 90,000 a year. I built at that point, a $50 million business, and I have $400,000 in savings. I put all those savings into Tumblr, Facebook, and Twitter stock, all of it. And then I start VaynerMedia at 34 and in a conference room of another company because I couldn't afford rent because I had no money, and with my brother. So 25, so first of all, that's just important because
yes,
so many people listening right now are 28 and are way ahead of where I was, are 32 and way ahead of where I was. Okay. So it speaks to what you can do in a decade if you fucking got it. 25-year-old me, super pent up, to prove to the world, most likely myself though, that I'm as good as I am. I just got done with my first full year of running the company. We went from 3 to like 8.9 million in a blast. And now I'm in year 2. Now I'm really in it. 18 months fully. Obviously through college and high school, I was in the store, but now I'm the fucking guy.
Yep.
And I'm a fucking machine. 7 a.m. in the store, leave at 10 p.m. every night, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every night, Monday through Saturday. No going out, no girlfriend. Sunday, sleep till like fucking noon, go to my parents' house, talk business. In the fall, watch the Jets. In the not fall, hang out with my little brother and my sister. 100% 1940s immigrant family man kind of world. Every day, 7 to 10 p.m. every day, every single day of my 25. Every day. Sleep to 11 a.m. Sunday, garage sale, and go to flea markets as a side hustle on Saturday for fun or Sunday for fun because I liked it. Or watch the Jets, or go to my parents' house an hour away from my apartment at that point, 45 minutes away, to hang out and talk business to set up the next week. Every day. That is literally my entire life. So when people now are like, oh, I hustle, yet like I get it, but it's by their standards. It is not by immigrant, and I like that people have balanced lives. I think that's great. That's just my answer to who 25-year-old me was.
Okay, so it goes right to what I want to ask you. So you just people look at me sometimes, and I'm not being self-deprecating either. I'm 49 next week, and oftentimes I think people, I look at least my age or older. And I say sometimes, I think one of the reasons I look a little bit older is my 20s resemble yours. Like it probably aged me a little bit. It probably experienced me a little bit. Like there were no vacations, right? Same thing. Difference, I got a little bit better financial reward earlier than you.
Yeah, what were you about?
I was hustling every single day, and I was building my financial company then, and then I was building my real estate businesses. And I'm just, same thing, sun up to when people were already been asleep for 3 or 4 hours, 6 days a week, sometimes half days, Sundays, for a decade. And what I want to ask you about, because so many things we say are similar, except this one point. I want to hear the nuance of it. When I get a 25-year-old guy who asks me, hey, I want to be somebody, I want to win. My answer is typically that, hey, you have to have patience because it may not happen now, but you got to get after it. And so, and I think that's what I was doing. That's what you were doing. That's what Zuckerberg was doing. That's what Cuban was doing. That's what LeBron was doing. But sometimes when I hear you say it, I feel like what I'm hearing, and maybe it's a soundbite, is
I know where you're going.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Travel to Europe. You'll get your life is long.
I'll explain.
Life is long.
Yeah, okay. I'll explain. I'm scared. When you and I were doing it, entrepreneurship was not cool, Ed.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you're hearing in that nuance, brother, is concern. The concern that a ton of fucking people want to be it now and aren't it. So I think people have now aspired to be an entrepreneur when they're not. And those are the people that are going through depression, are suicidal, are unhappy because they're in a game that doesn't match them. So when I say that, it leads, I'm playing chess. It's never a one size fits all. I want to see what the person says next. I'm looking for the tell. Got it, brother?
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, well, listen, don't overstress. You got patience. Your 20s is a good high risk, high reward time. If it's in you, like if you said that to me, if Gary said to Gary, yo, go to Europe, go this, I'd be like, fuck you.
Right. Me too.
Well, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Because when the kid says, yeah, you're right. I'm like, I couldn't fucking, okay. And I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
I had to do it every second. I couldn't breathe. This is when you're a natural purebred, you're in Beyonce, LeBron, Pablo Picasso category. You're an artist.
Yeah.
You're an artist. There was no choice. I'm not doing this for the fucking flex or the gram or the money or the house or the jet or I don't want a single thing. I don't want to be part of any exclusive club. I don't need an island. I don't need a house. I fucking need the game.
Yeah.
I need the fucking game.
You know, it's funny. I thought, brother, that's my favorite thing probably ever been said on here.
Thank you.
And the reason is that I live it. And I had a really successful dude tell me when I was young, because I was going crazy and he was crazy. He was in his 50s. His name was also Ed. I'll never forget it. He's passed away since. And he goes, hey, man, it's never going to go away.
It's never going to go away.
And I look at
You ready for this? You ready for this?
Yeah.
I think it's stronger in me now. Now I'm like, fuck it. Now I'm like, I want a statue. I want National Entrepreneur Day to be a stay-at-home holiday on November 14th because that was my birthday. I'm like, fuck it. I want it more now. I'm more ambitious. I'm more hungry now. That's the truth. That's not some midlife crisis thing for all the 20-year-olds. If you're like me, you'll remember this fucking interview and be like, fuck, he's right. It's true. I'm hungrier.
Yeah. It is true. It's become more of a fabric of who I am. There's momentum in my life, just like you've got momentum. People also underestimate the power of momentum. Like
I agree.
You get your life going, it magnifies everything you've got going around you. Every year, the best baseball team doesn't win the World Series. Sometimes it's the hottest bullpen.
Oh, I love you for that analogy. Literally. You know what's crazy right now? We're talking right now in the background. It just popped up in the background. The 2008 AFC Championship game, Patriots, Chiefs, who obviously I hate the Pats with all my heart, but that was a game of momentum. The Pats just scored. They're up 14-0 now in this game. I think they went up like 21-0. They were up huge. They had all the momentum in the first half. Then the Chiefs had all the momentum in the second half. For people not to understand that the easiest comp is sports to life on this, it is pure momentum. I couldn't agree with you more. You know what I love to think about, Ed? The things we said no to that were actually the trigger to a hotter, to a streak, to a heater, that we said, I hope that heaven is where it shows you what life would have been based on choices. I love that I didn't go to some night where at night would have been these two people that would have made this deal with me. Like, I love knowing that like momentum is based on choice, that I've missed momentum many times in my life, and that I've gotten momentum many times in my life. And I love that part of the game actually, which is like decisions actually matter. And sometimes when you have the humility to go to a thing that doesn't seem right, you get something that triggers a domino. And sometimes when you go to something, you're like, I mean, I remember sitting down, there's one meeting I remember very vividly with Howard Schultz. I had a meeting with Howard Schultz to kind of just, I was getting hot, getting in this, and like I got connected. I remember sitting 4 minutes before it. I'm like, I'm about to walk in here and I'm about to blow this dude's face off and it's going to be a fucking foundational thing. I walked in, we had a 15-minute meeting, 20-minute meeting, and nothing's happened. And I didn't feel like I had an off day. I felt like I gave it, but it didn't click. Whereas when I went to go see Jimmy Iovine for this meeting, I'm like, I'm gonna blow his face off. Within 3 minutes, he's like, you're next Simon Cowell, and he casted me in the Apple show, Planet of the Apps, with will.i.am, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Jessica Alba. And if that show actually got seen, unfortunately, it was before all the OTT stuff and the way TV, like that would have been right, and that would have been one of the moments. So, you know, the reality is that,
wow.
you know, like I love that kind of shit. And then I'm trying to think of like something good where like, who'd I meet randomly? Like, I'm trying to think of a real logical thing. Well, you know, I took a meeting with the Jets president at a bagel store because he wanted to sell me a skybox. I told him about where the world was going. We became great friends. That's Matt Higgins, who's on Shark Tank, who's Steve Ross's right hand. That led to him leaving the Jets years later, going to Steve Ross and Dolphins. That became the gentleman who bought a piece of my company. And like that bagel meeting became a monster meeting for me. And I didn't know who Matt Higgins was going into it. So I love chance. I love momentum, and I love what starts momentum. That's where I just took this.
Yeah.
I agree more than any, to remind everybody right now, say yes. You know, one thing that I hate about people that haven't achieved anything and people that have achieved everything, they overvalue their time. And it's a tricky one. If you haven't gotten there yet, people are like, Gary, I'm not doing that pro bono work. I should be compensated. I'm like, bro, your work's worth nothing. Like there's 700,000 video makers that I can tweet right now. Like, sorry, like when your work's not worth anything, like no humility. And then again, no humility. When people get fancy, I take so many small meetings. I do so many things like tea with Gary Vee in the morning during this COVID crisis to like just help. And once every 8,000 times, it helps me.
This gentleman to my left, just to give you a background, this guy parlayed a 990 SAT score into a multi-billion-dollar company that he built. It grew 57,000% the first 3 years. I want you to get your head around that. He was named by Success Magazine last year as one of the 25 most influential entrepreneurs on the planet. Tom Bilyeu, thank you for being here today, brother.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm chasing money for 8.5 years. My mantra is I want to get rich. That's it.
You better get rich. Father-in-law wants you rich. You've promised you're going to get rich. You always wanted to be rich when you were young.
100%.
Right.
And that wasn't a dirty word for me. I didn't understand people who were conflicted about money. I was like, it's powerful. So I want to get rich. And I just made it all about that. And so for 6.5 of those years, I didn't take days off. Even when we would go to London for Christmas, I had like a video camera that would allow, well, this is actually slightly in the future, but a great example. I would take a video camera that would let me watch the production line at Quest.
Oh my God.
So like that kind of obsessive, like I'm all in.
Yeah.
Back at the technology company, same kind of thing, but I would either be working on the tech company or trying to start other companies at night. So we talk a lot about, we had like 5 or 6 companies fail, all side hustles.
Yeah.
But it was like, we just kept trying to learn and figure this out.
Yeah.
And so growing in that, becoming better, understanding marketing, helping elevate the company, really rising up to a peer status, watching other people fall away because they couldn't emotionally hang in the environment. And yeah, then they made me I didn't ask for a raise for 5 years. I was like, I want to be so valuable that they feel gross for what they're paying me.
Yeah.
And so because I wanted the equity, I didn't want the salary.
Yep.
So I was like, dude, I'm in this for the equity. You don't have to worry about me. Equity, equity, equity. I just kept it on their mind, like, hey, you said that was a possibility. I want you to know that means everything to me, and that's why I'm here. And so hit the 6.5 year mark. I'm 10% owner in the company, and I'm completely miserable. And I've burned out, and I realized that entrepreneurship had given. It was making me stronger, bigger, faster, and now it was beginning to take away because I didn't care about the product. I didn't love what we were doing. I wasn't passionate. I was just chasing money, and money just wasn't that interesting. At that point, on paper, we both know the difference between paper money and real money.
Right.
But on paper, I was a multimillionaire. And I went in and I said, guys, here's your equity back. I'm quitting. I'm not crossing the finish line, so I don't think I should get anything for this. And it actually ended up being like a really cathartic moment where we could all say what we'd been feeling, which is, none of us are happy. And so it became, well, if we're going to keep doing this, if we're going to keep building businesses, because by then it was very clear to me the struggle is guaranteed, the success is not. And so I'm going to go do something I love. And they agreed, they felt the same. So we said, okay, well, what would we build that we would love even if we were failing? And so for 3 very different reasons, that became a nutrition company. And for me, it was, I grew up in a morbidly obese family. My uncle essentially ate himself to death when I was 12 years old, and it was scary and sad. My mom is morbidly obese, has been my entire life. My sister's morbidly obese, has been almost her entire life. My dad at one point was morbidly obese and then lost weight, but it was like, that's just where my family lived.
Yeah.
And so I was like, they're going to die far sooner than they need to. And there's this great Mother Teresa quote, nobody will act for the many, but people will act for the one. And so I just needed to wake up every day and think about my mom and my sister, and that was it. And I thought, I can show up every day and fight for them. It's not about the money anymore. I can fight for them. And look, a lot of business acumen went into this. This was not just, we had good intentions and it built a big business. It was, we understood business, right? I'd now been in business for 8.5 years, grinding it out, building this technology company, which was hard as hell. But now we were able to marry that. And by the way, we took the tech company through the recession and everything. So, I mean, it was like I'd taken some knocks. So we really understood business at this point. And so now we were going to start something predicated entirely on value creation. That was like our mantra. Doesn't matter what's more profitable. Matters what adds more value. And so we literally were saying these things. And we didn't actually throw our hands in a pile. I wish we had, be a cooler story. But like, all but that said, and each of us needs to have fun every day.
You said that.
100%.
That's ballsy. Like, you've busted your tail. You finally got on the cusp of everything you thought you ever wanted, right? And then you have the vision, the guts, the self-awareness, the intuition, whatever the heck you want to call it, to go, no, I want to go chase my why. I got to do something with purpose to it, right? But I got to ask you, you entered a space, dude, that was loaded with people already. There's like, I'm reading this thing, like 1,600 different flavors or companies in the same exact space, right?
In a category that had been declining for years.
Right, it was going the other direction,
it was like
right?
the most, they say, look for blue ocean where there's no blood. This was red ocean as far as the eye could see.
You're like a decade after Bill Phillips and EAS or whatever, right? So like, it's unbelievable. You start Quest. I'm curious, success leaves clues, right? So take us a little bit through Quest for a few minutes. What made it work? Like, what did you do that was crazy that other people didn't do? Because I've told you before, my first podcast, didn't even know who you were at the time. I used Quest products. I actually endorsed them, not knowing you, on the first podcast I ever put out, because they tasted so damn good, to be honest with you. Was that part of the thing you guys wanted to do? Like
100%.
It was?
So
that was purposeful.
Yeah. Our mantra was, you can tell the world to eat less and exercise more, and it will work for every single person ever that's ever done it. But the reality is, the vast majority of the world will not do that. And we already know that, right? So people have been saying that for like 60, 70 years. And so we're moving in the wrong direction. So our thing was, don't change behavior, leverage it. So we already know people will eat things they want to eat. You can't stop people from eating a chocolate chip cookie. So the question was, could you make a chocolate chip cookie that was actually good for them? So that metabolically, it was actually advantageous to eat that cookie. Could we bust our asses that hard to make that thing? And so it wasn't easy, but now we had a mission. We wanted to end metabolic disease. Now, when you have that clarity, I know people are going to eat things based on taste purely. So we know we have to address that, which is why we made snack foods instead of like, coming out with broccoli and,
chips.
Steamed.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We made chips. And so, but if you called Quest and said, hey, I want to get in shape, what should I eat? Our answer was boiled chicken breast and steamed broccoli. Because that's the truth. Right? So we're not trying to pull a fast one. We want people to know they can trust us. We know where our products fit in. When you absolutely have to have a chocolate chip cookie, eat our chocolate chip cookie. Right? So that was our shtick. And so we went to manufacturers and thought, okay, we'll get this made by other people just like everybody else. We're a marketing company. We don't want to be a manufacturing company. And they just said, this bar can't be made. They're like, and they couldn't put words around it, but what we realized was the reason the bar couldn't be made, because I'm sure many people thought, hey, let's make a bar that tastes great but doesn't have sugar. But then they won't run through the machinery. So for the last 70 years, equipment has been made to spec to make things that have high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup has a very specific viscosity. Once you take that out, even if you replace it with another liquid binder, it's just entirely different. So it wouldn't run through the equipment.
And you knew none of this
prior to it.
Right.
I remember when my partner came and said, we need to become our own manufacturer. We were all like, what? Like, it just sounded so absurd. But he was like, look at it. The evidence is there. These guys aren't going to do it. We can't trust even, because if we're manufacturing with them and they're starting to fall behind and the cost of the bar is going up because it's having trouble on the equipment, they will put ingredients in to make it run more smoothly. And he was like, we've just seen it, because we knew other people in the industry. And he was like, we've seen it too many times. So we can't trust it. And if we're going to build a business based on trust, then we have to do it ourselves. So naivete of the beginner, we had no idea how enormous that task was. By the time I left, we had over 300,000 square feet of storage and manufacturing. It was insanity. 1,400 employees. Bars are coming off the line at the rate of 1.5 million a day. Like it's like a machine gun. It's crazy.
My favorite part of that plant, by the way, everybody knows the after. The after is it becomes this just household name, one of the fastest growing companies on earth, regardless of the business space. Founded by 3 dudes who were basically trying to do something out of cause that could have probably made a couple bucks doing the thing they were already doing. Formed a brotherhood, a real trust-based relationship. My favorite part of that plant story, though, isn't the protein bars coming out of there. My favorite part of that story goes back to Lisa and her dad. And so finally, your face just changed, just so you know, right there. So finally, after all of this journey, right, from, I'm picturing this 16-year-old dude, I'm actually going back all the way to you with the guy on the spectrum and saying, I'm going to get you to talk, right, the jokester. And I'm picturing you cheating in high school. I'm picturing the 990 SAT. I'm picturing you get into SC. I'm picturing you not in film school. I'm picturing this guy all the way laying in the bed in the morning, all the failures, the startups, the false starts, all this stuff, what I think is a man in conflict with himself, it sounds like to me, all of his life, right? Then meeting the woman of her dreams, but dad's not thinking you might be the dude, right? All of that journey to this 300,000 square foot plant, or one of them at the time anyways, and you end up, all those protein bars coming out of there is awesome, and there's a lot that still come out of there. But what really happened in one of those plants, or the plant that's the most special thing to me, is what? Tell them what happened.
So my father-in-law obviously had been watching the journey from day one, and but he hadn't been to America since we launched the company. And so he'd seen, you know, oh, he's struggling a bit at awareness technologies, and oh, they're starting this new protein bar company, which sounds like financial suicide to him. Yeah. But you know, okay, if that's what you guys want to do, and so when he came, he didn't realize how big it had gotten. And we had reported the numbers to him, but we kept it really dry with him. He's not a guy you hype. So it's like, this is our top line revenue. And I think some part of him thought he wasn't understanding it. Because I mean, it was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Revenue, not valuation, revenue. And so like some part of him just couldn't quite allow himself to believe it had gotten that big. Because we were in the same house, you know, we were driving better cars by that point, but you know, like it was no drastic lifestyle change because we were just pumping everything back into the business. So he comes over and we're walking the floor, and it's, you know, it's the one we were in at that time was over 100,000 square feet. 800 employees scrambling around him. He's crazy. The bar's coming off, everything. We've walked him around the whole facility, and people are greeting me like the boss, man. So it was like, Tom, thank you so much. Like really, really kind, generous people, busting ass on the line. And if you show them kindness, they show you kindness in return. They didn't know he was my father-in-law. They just wanted to come and say hi. So he's seeing like people who seem legitimately happy to see me, and all of this madness going on. And I said, Andreas, do you remember when you asked me how I was going to take care of your daughter? And he said, yes. I said, how am I doing? And he just started to cry.
Marc Randolph, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Ed. Thanks for having me. And you know, I'm sure everyone on the show has heard of Netflix. My real question usually is, how many of you are paying for it?
Those of you that are startup entrepreneurs or smaller ones, that flexibility that you have that maybe some of your bigger competitors don't have is something that you ought to count in the inventory bank of an advantage of yours, of all the disadvantages that you have. Your mobility, your flexibility, your ability to pivot, sometimes when you're smaller, is much easier to point. I'm just also curious.
We shouldn't underestimate that either, because that is what makes this such an amazing business, is that you can have these huge companies with huge assets, huge numbers of employees, but they're vulnerable. And they shouldn't be. I mean, it should be impossible for two or three women or men in some small garage somewhere to take down a big company. But the big companies are just lumbering, and they just don't have that ability to change as quickly as you do. It's what makes it so exciting.
Did they ever have the vision or wisdom to approach you about an acquisition and just get you out of the way and swallow you up? And if they did you just have no interest in it?
No, in fact, quite the opposite. You know, right before we hit that 500,000 subscriber mark, this is about 2.5, maybe 2 years in, we finally had cracked the code and figured out what the business model would be that would work for our business. And it was a subscription model. And as you know, the subscription models are wonderful, and that's recurring revenue, but they have a terrible downside, is you got to pay all the acquisition cost up front, and then the actual margin leaks in over time. And we nailed it. And all of a sudden, customers were flying in and money was flying out, but that was not a problem until the dot-com bubble burst. So I'm giving you the setup that you have these small team of people, less than 100 of us, who are crushing it. And then all of a sudden, in a matter of months, are going, we're going to go out of business. We are hemorrhaging because we're bringing on customers so fast. We can't raise more money. And that's when we did this thing that a prudent entrepreneur does, is we said, we're going to sell ourselves. So we reached out to Blockbuster. We finally got the meeting, by 2 months in, because we were a gnat compared to them. And we flew to Dallas and we went up into this huge, skyscraper with the cavernous conference room with the endangered hardwood conference table, whatever, and pitched. And it was cool because it was working. We were saying, we'll run this online business. You guys run the stores. We'll find these incredible synergies and we both win. And it was going great. And then they asked that big question, which is how much? And I was there with my co-founder, Reed Hastings, and he had been tapped to make the ask. So he kind of leans in and as confidently as he can goes, $50 million? And they laughed at us, or pretty close. And it was this tremendously humbling moment. And we were flying back from Dallas back to California. And I remember being crushed because this was going to be that magic, this deus ex machina, as they say in the film and book business, where the heroes are against the cliff and it's going to be, and all of a sudden the hand of God plucks them to safety through some miraculous intervention. But not only was the miraculous intervention not going to come, they were going to compete with us. And in some ways, it was this classic entrepreneurial moment where we recognized that, well, like my dad used to say sometimes, the only way out is through, that we would have to take them down ourselves. And, now that company they could have bought for 50 million is now valued at 250 billion. And the company, which had at the time 60,000 employees and 9,000 stores, is down to one store.
Oh my God. That right there is one of those things where you go back and rewind this, and I know I'm just talking old school, and you listen to that is one of the most incredible stories of all time, from all different angles. I mean, if you're a small startup entrepreneur and you're like, imagine some of these rejections you're getting being hidden blessings. And if you are one of the bigger ones, to be listening to them. And you're speaking about your dad, you're interesting to me. First off, it's obvious your critical thinking skills and your entrepreneurial spirit, but you guys, Mark's a geology major. Who the heck's a geology major that ends up doing what you've done? But your dad was a nuclear engineer, correct? So your father's a smart man. But I think part of your nature is one of these hidden things that great entrepreneurs do. You really are into what the client wants. And really, one of the things, if you can explain to everybody, you already sort of had a background where you're doing lots of research about the buying patterns, weren't you? Buying behaviors of your existing clients and potential clients. And ultimately that helped sort of create the model itself, did it not? I don't know that enough entrepreneurs think about the client first.
No question about it. I mean, those of you who are actually seeing this can tell that I've been around for a while. And the first half of my career, I was a direct marketing guy. I was a junk mail king. I did catalogs. I did magazine circulation. And all of these things have something in common, which is basically it's selling to someone who you can't see. You're reaching out with either a mailing piece or a mailed catalog or television direct response. It's all the same thing. And it's something that I call remote empathy. It's this ability to figure out what somebody wants or how they're going to react to something you say without seeing them. And this was 15 years of my career, and my first 3 startups were all direct response companies. But I built this kind of discipline of being able to figure these things out, learn how to test, learn how to analytics, learn the subscription business, learn customer service. And that when I saw the internet starting to rise up, and this is in the mid 90s, I immediately said, oh my God, this is direct marketing on steroids. This is an incredible opportunity to connect directly with customers, to personalize an approach for each customer. And it was the natural precursor to saying, I've got to do e-commerce. And Netflix was just one of, 100 different ideas we had to how to sell something on the internet. But from the very beginning, it was predicated on, I'm going to do something which has an individual connection with every customer. This is not going to ever be one size fits all. And video fit that really nicely because all of us have different tastes, and Hollywood had sprung up with tons of content designed to match that taste, but there was no one really in the middle connecting people with what they wanted to watch.
Unbelievable. I mean, guys, this is a masterclass. I'm grateful that we get to visit about some of these things. And I'm reading like some of your business philosophy. One thing you did, we don't spend time on today, but one thing is you also knew what you were great at. You knew your strength was more in the startup phase of things, and you had enough humility to bring in another CEO or people that could take the company to a different place based on its current circumstances. I don't think enough entrepreneurs are aware of maybe what they don't want to be doing or what their strengths aren't. But one of the other things that I read, this blog you wrote, I think you might have wrote it a year ago, but you republished it recently, or at least it came out, about the elephant in the room. And when I was coming up in business, I had the good fortune of getting to know Jack Welch just a little bit. And one of Jack's big principles was candor, being candid with people. Could you share with everybody the story about when you were let go at your job, and then your philosophy about, discussing the hard things in business and the elephant in the room? This is huge, everybody.
Yeah, people have this false sense of wanting to preserve not hurt somebody's feelings. Yeah. And what I've kind of learned is that you're never fooling anybody. And worse, when there's an employee who's not working out, and out of perhaps your sense of goodness, you're trying to make it work, or you don't want to hurt their feelings, or you go, this person, it's terrible for two big reasons. One is people aren't stupid, and they can see that this person is not performing. And then they form the opinion about you. And they go, either Mark is stupid and he cannot tell that this person's a loser, or even worse, Mark is weak and he's afraid to do something about it. And wow, that has always kind of resonated with me when all of a sudden I realized how it backfires when you're afraid to take action. And there's so many examples of this. I mean, listen, we've all worked for companies before, and there's this classic thing when someone is not performing and they put them on would you call it a PIP, a performance improvement plan or something stupid like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I go, that is such cruel and unusual punishment that we're going to do this kabuki theater for 6 months where I'm going to pretend that you're going to actually get good at your job and you're going to pretend you're going to go through with it. But both of us know you're going to get ultimately fired, and all I'm doing is covering my ass. How much better it is to call the person in and say, Ed, it's not working out. You know it. I can know it. We all know this, but it's not because you're a bad person. It's because you're just not a good match for what we need right now. And let me help you find a great job. I'll give you the recommendations. I believe in you. Let's find something that works. God, that's just listen, the person's going to be shocked. It hurts to lose your job. I'm not saying it makes it easy, but when you look back on it, everyone feels better about there being honesty behind this whole approach.
I agree. And just so you know, this was born out of a situation where you lost your job and you basically talked your boss into letting you stay.
Yes, that's right.
How ridiculous.
Yeah. I said, I heard this stupid story that this is, years and years ago, but I'd heard that it's easier to get a job when you have a job. So I talked him into saying, let me stay for whatever it was, 2 months or whatever it was, the severance they were going to give me. And it was terrible because I was the walking dead. Everyone knew that I'd been fired, but we were all playing along with this ridiculous play acting. Yeah, and of course I didn't use the time to get another job.
Yeah, what it does is it erodes your culture. When you don't have candor, when you keep people around that shouldn't be around, or at least move their butt to a different seat, it erodes the culture in your company, and you just don't perform at the level that you could. And business is millimeters, it's inches. These little things are the differentiation between having an exit someday or becoming a world-class company, or even you becoming a millionaire or multimillionaire and not. These little things that we're talking about here. Jamie KERN LIMA. So thank you for being here today. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Your story came out of really a struggle of yours, right? Your whole dream, your whole business. And so many people, that are listening to this are going through a struggle right now, and they think that struggle they have disqualifies them from becoming successful, when in fact it may be the very pathway to their dreams. So tell us about that with you, first of all.
Sometimes when there's no proof around you that your idea is right, and like your friends and family are starting to worry about you and they're starting to be like, are you sure you should have, started this? Are you getting any sales yet? And it was like that. And it was this 3-year journey of having to figure out how to turn down the volume on my own self-doubt and on rejection everywhere, and kind of like tune in, or turn up the volume rather, on that inner knowing that kept telling me you're supposed to do this. And that kind of was one of the things that made all the difference. I had this aha moment where I'm like, wait a minute, like my whole life I've seen these ads on television and in magazines. I've never seen anyone that has problematic skin the way I do. I've never seen I don't even know if those models were actually using that product. And I'm like, what if there's literally nothing out there that works? And if I can figure out how to create it, I can, solve my own problems, but I could probably also help a lot of other people out there who maybe have given up on makeup. And then I had this, like, I think, moment of grace where what hit me was way deeper, in the sense of, I realized, like, okay, if I can do this, I want to actually create a company where, instead of these like unrealistic images of beauty that, from the time I was a little girl, I wanted to look like that, but they always made me feel like I wasn't enough. I was like, what if I, create this company and actually use real, women, all ages and shapes and sizes and skin tones, and call them beautiful models and mean it. Like, maybe I can shift culture around inclusivity and beauty for every little girl out there who's about to start doubting herself, and every grown woman who still does. And so it became this big mission. But like anyone out there listening right now who's going through this, or maybe you've launched a business right now and you're like, why isn't this gaining traction? I poured everything I had into this dream. And, I wrote the business plan with my husband on our honeymoon flight to South Africa. We got back, quit our jobs, and went all in, used all of our savings. And I thought, oh, if we can just create something that literally works, like, it's just going to sell.
Right.
Then I learned how hard it was to become an entrepreneur. And it was this moment where I learned probably one of the most important lessons in my whole journey, which is like how to get still, how to listen to your own inner knowing, and making the decision to trust it, right? And when I left television news, I thought that was my dream job. Like, that was what I was going to do my whole career. But sometimes knowing when to let go of a dream isn't quitting. It's actually the victory. It's like that knowing of when to let go of a dream is as important as knowing when to go after one. So I listened to it to launch this dream. But then the first 3 years of running this business from my living room, couldn't afford to pay myself, and literally hundreds of rejections. I thought, Ed, oh, I'm going to shift culture and beauty. I have this great idea. And so there's beauty stores like Sephora and Ulta and QVC and department stores. Every single one of them said no after no after no for 3 years. Literally would say things like, well, you're not the right fit. Your packaging isn't prestige enough, and women won't buy makeup from women they don't aspire to look like. And it was just no after no after no. For 3 years, we got down to under $1,000 in our bank account. By the way, I'm sharing this because when you Google my story, and this is why I wrote this book, Ed, because if we don't share the real stuff, like that's when we feel alone in our own rejection and our own, lack of success or traction, right? And when you Google my story, all you ever see is like, oh, Denny's waitress sold her company for $1 billion cash. And it makes it seem like, oh, she just got lucky, or
cruised.
And, it was a journey that didn't make sense to keep going, except for every time I would check in with my gut. I was like, okay, I'm supposed to do this, but everyone keeps saying no. We got down to under $1,000 in our bank account, as I mentioned. And sometimes when there's no proof around you that your idea is right, and like your friends and family are starting to worry about you and they're starting to be like, are you sure you should have, you know, started this? Are you getting any sales yet? And it was like that. And it was this 3-year journey of having to figure out how to turn down the volume on my own self-doubt and on rejection everywhere, and kind of like tune in or turn up the volume rather on that inner knowing that kept telling me you're supposed to do this. And that kind of was one of the things that made all the difference.
There's so much there, and I want you to keep going. A couple things I want to unpack there. Number one is this unrealistic image for women. It's really interesting. You know, with men, it really isn't that way. If you look at football, Tom Brady has a few ads. He's the good looking dude, right? He's got a watch ad or whatever. But the guy that got all the ads was Peyton Manning. It was the everyman when it comes to men. With women, these unrealistic images, especially in the beauty industry, for the most part, are the images that we see. And so you really did revolutionize an industry. That's number one. Number two, it's interesting to me that your dream was to be a broadcaster. I got to tell you, we both bagged groceries at Safeways, and I was a broadcasting major in college, and that was my dream. I didn't know it was going to show up 30 years later, you know, after my entrepreneurial journey. But I think life starts after your first dream goes away. I really believe that's where you're defined. And I'm so curious about this journey with the rejection. I have a philosophy. I don't know if you agree with this. I love the title of your book, Believe It, because what you're talking about, turning up this volume on your inner voice and turning down the external rejections. Those rejections you got were over and over again. I was telling my son this, who thinks he wants to be an entrepreneur. He said, Dad, what's one of the things that most people wouldn't tell you? I said, I don't know, that maybe the most important thing is your ability to deal with rejection as an entrepreneur. We talk about vision, we talk about, you know, communication, but can you deal with the rejection? And in your case, it broke my heart, but there was one meeting you had where you thought you had a deal finally, right? With this VC guy. And I want you guys just to feel the depth of the rejection that you may experience as an entrepreneur. And could you do what Jamie did and still push back? So picture years and years of rejection. You're running out of cash. You're working out of your living room. Everyone's telling you no. And then this dude almost says yes, but then really hits you with a hard no. Tell them about that.
Yeah. And I thought literally he was going to be my saving grace, right? Because again, we were down to no money, and we got interest from a private equity company, and they loved our products. Our product worked, like it really worked. So they loved the product, and they wanted to have meetings. So we started going down that path, and you know, they were really big. I mean, they are really big. They've invested in a ton of consumer product companies that you and I buy at the grocery store, and you know, they made a lot of them household names from nothing. And I just thought, oh my gosh, if they invest, A, I'm not going to go bankrupt. B, maybe they'll help get me into all these retail stores that keep telling me no and keep telling me I'm not the right fit and all that. And so, you know, we did meeting after meeting, and we started the diligence phase, which is, you know, where you show all your projections, your product pipeline, everything. And it got down to the last meeting, and my husband, Paulo, and I flew up for it. And I thought, like, this is it. Like, this is going to be it. And I'll never forget, the head guy was standing about 3 feet from me. And he thanked me. He said, you know, that we should be proud of the product we created. And then he says to me, and he's about 3 feet from me, face to face. And he says, so I want to let you know it's a no. We're going to pass on investing in IT Cosmetics. And I said, okay, like I'm used to hearing no at this point, right? And I'm like, all right, well, you know, can you tell me why? Because usually feedback is a gift, usually. And I'm like, can you tell me why? And he's like, do you want me to be really honest? And I said, yeah. And I'll never forget, like, I remember just like him looking at me for a minute, and I remember feeling my heart racing really fast. And then I remember seeing his lips move in slow motion. And he basically said, he did say straight to my face, I just don't think women will buy makeup from someone who looks like you, with your body and your weight.
Wow.
And I remember it was this moment where for me, it was almost like this lifetime of body doubt and self-doubt kind of like flooded my body, and almost felt like I was staring my own fear straight in the eye, listening to him. And I knew I had to keep my faith bigger than it. But Ed, in that moment, like, it's wild. I actually, it hurt. Like, I literally went in my car in the parking lot and cried my eyes out. Those things hurt. But what stands out to me in that moment, and I actually never felt, I didn't get mad at him. I still am not mad at him. Because guess what? The whole reason, that whole why beneath the why on why I was doing this company, like he literally passed on investing in my company because he had the exact same mindset, right? That everyone else does about what you have to look like, the box you have to fit into to be successful. And he's just as much I don't want to say victim, byproduct maybe of the whole beauty industry too. He's passing on an investment in my company because of my weight. And I remember this moment, but the thing that sticks out to me most is in this moment, I had this feeling, this deep feeling, like as he's telling me this, that he's wrong. And I had that feeling, but I knew nothing yet that I had done prove that, because I had no sales yet really. And I also knew like proving it would first and foremost hinge on me believing it for myself. And, you know, fast forward. And by the way, in the years after that, like it's discipline of recognizing when someone else's voice is playing in your head all of a sudden. And I listened to a show you did actually where you scratch it and right. And that's what I have to do over and over. Like I'd have to literally get really good at turning down the volume on those things because, and I want to tell you a full circle moment that happened. It's so good. But like, I feel like that, what you just shared about telling your son this advice, right? I feel like that's everything because I feel like so many people, what ends up happening is everyone else's rejections, right, end up like equating to self-doubt in our own head, our own self-doubt about ourselves. We start to turn the volume up on that to the point where with all of it, with everyone else's opinions, and in my case, the lack of success around me, it can get so loud that we can't even hear our own internal knowing anymore. And I feel like so many people, and then you have your friends and your family, like they mean the best, but they're seeing you through their own lens of fear and inexperience, right? And so between all of it, so many people I feel like end up literally talking themselves out of their own calling and talking themselves out of their own truth and staying in their comfort zone at like the cost of it chipping away at their soul. We've all done this. And literally missing out on the person they're born to be. And I feel like and my story is like years and years and years of rejection. But when I look back at the things I did wrong and the things I did right, usually like my biggest mistakes came down to when I actually didn't listen to something I knew in my gut. And I decided to go with something an expert had told me when it didn't feel like quite right. And the biggest successes are when I really listened to that knowing, even when it went against what other people told me. So like this guy telling me this, had I changed who I was, right, and tried to fit some mold that he said would sell, if that was who I was authentically, then great. But it's not for me, right? And so had I ever conformed to him or any of those retailers that told me change this, change that, and maybe we'll bring you into our store, or L'Oreal that for 3 years of meetings said no and all the things I needed to do differently. Had I listened to most of any of that, especially the parts that didn't align with my gut instinct, I would have never sold my company for over $1 billion. I probably would be out of business. So that's
you hear yourself when you say this, Jamie, where you're like, I would have never sold my company for $1 billion. Still, when that comes out of your mouth, is there a part of you like, I sold my company for over $1 billion? Does it still hit you a little bit?
On one hand, I still can't process it. On the other hand, you'll understand this when I say this. And you won't judge me for saying this. And I believe actually everyone in your community, I believe they're part of your community because they'll understand this too. Selling your company for $1 billion is exciting, but like for me, I don't feel like I'm put on this earth to compete with anyone else. I feel like I'm put on this earth to compete with who God made me capable of becoming.
Amen.
And I feel like I'm just getting started. Like I'm not there yet. So selling a company for $1 billion is exciting, but like, I feel like stepping into all of who I am and serving and giving and all the things I'm really called to do, I still feel like I'm not there yet. By the way, you talked about.
I feel like having watched you speak a couple times and then listening now, I feel like all of that happened, all of the struggle, all of the ups and downs, all of the selling of the company, all you've learned, all you've been able to articulate, your broadcast background, all of that stuff is leading you right now to your time. Like, I think you were called for what you're doing now, which is teaching and inspiring people and giving them hope. However, you did say it came full circle. Yeah. What did you mean when you said that? What's the full circle?
Ed. Okay, you love this. Okay, so this is so good because I actually never got mad at him, right? Because for me, it was like something bigger than him. Yeah. So fast forward a few years, and when we actually ended up selling to L'Oreal, it was their largest U.S. acquisition in their history. And so it made the homepage of Wall Street Journal, a bunch of stuff like that. And the day that the deal was announced, I got an email from him. And he said, congratulations, I was wrong. So proud of you, that whole thing he did. And also I learned that so two things. I learned it would have been the most successful investment in his firm's history. But here's the thing, and this is where our setbacks, I feel like, oh my gosh, our setbacks, even when they suck, like it sucked to hear him say those words to me. It hurt. I cry, like it hurts, right? Rejection in almost any form basically says to us, you're not enough. You don't belong. You're not worth, I don't think I will make money off you, or I don't believe in you, or it comes in all those forms, and it sucks. But I really believe, even almost all the time, when I look back at almost all the rejections, I feel like that, like, again, those setbacks really are our setups. And sometimes rejection is really like serendipitous grace, wrapped in this package labeled painful rejection. And what I mean by that is, I was so desperate at the time. I think you just posted, I just saw your thing where you're like, scarcity is value. So yeah, I had no scarcity back then. I would have given him like any part of my company. We were down to under $1,000 in our bank account. I didn't know how we were going to survive. Had he wanted to invest, had he said yes to us that day, I would probably give him the majority of the company for probably almost no money, just hoping to survive. But because he didn't believe in me, and because we got so much rejection along the way, when we ended up selling to L'Oreal 8 years into the business, I was still the largest shareholder.
That's awesome.
And so, right?
I love this. Serendipitous grace.
This is Lauren Everts Bosstick with a hyphen. And the handsome Michael Bosstick here with no hyphen, are my guests here today. And you probably recognize their faces because, like I said, they have one of the top podcasts in the world, but they're also built an incredible brand. They're entrepreneurs, and they're young people that are succeeding. And so I wanted to pick their brains about why you become so successful. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us. This is beautiful.
Did it start with the blog? Is that where it started?
It started with the blog. The blog's the mothership. It's the foundation. And it's funny because I look back on myself 9 years ago, and I didn't know obviously what I was doing, but I went into it with three things. Wanted a community. You said the other word, intention. I didn't go into this to make money. I went into it knowing that money would come, but I didn't go into it thinking I'm gonna make all this money and that's all I care about and how do I monetize? I didn't make one dime, and I really want everyone to hear this because I get so many questions from bloggers. I didn't make one dime for 3 years. And I blogged 7 days a week.
My gosh.
And I wasn't like waiting for the money. I just knew it would come as I continued to provide valuable, tangible content. And that's the third one is providing that quality content. It's so important.
To piggyback off that, there's so many people that approach us now and they say, I want to create this brand. And the first question is, I want to do this because I want to make this. And my answer, especially in my capacity now with Dear Media, is always saying, your intention always needs to be first providing value to a community or to an audience. Like the one thing that Lauren and I, speaking on the show a little bit, the intention was always to provide insight or value or some type, like we just released this podcast and I said, the whole point is to provide positive change, right?
Yes.
If somebody's listening to this show, that there's a takeaway, whether they want to start a business, they want to live a better life, whether they want to look and feel better. And I think that there's so many creators that are jumping in this space and they're getting ahead of themselves saying, I need to make money.
I agree with you.
They don't understand that if you build the community first and provide value to an audience, that's the money will come, right?
Yes.
And the bigger problem then you have is saying what you say yes to and what you say no to.
Yeah, they're asking the wrong questions.
You know, it's funny, I'd love to add to what you said there, but those would be the three things I would say. about building community, having that intention, and then you got to create great content that's valuable to people. There's nothing that's perfect. That's exactly what I've done.
But that's why I love your content so much, is you do those 3 things, and I don't know if those were your 3 things, but I get all of that from you.
You know, I think for me, I think you started with more clear intention than me. I think this is great for everybody. Let me say this too. Lauren started with a blog, and a lot of you messaged me, I don't want to do a podcast. There's all kinds of different ways that you could be expressing your content, and we're going to talk about blogging in a minute because you're so, to this day, like incredible at it. I'm a male. I think your audience is slightly more female probably, but I consume your content every single day because it applies to me 95% of the time, and the 5% of it that doesn't apply, if it's female centric, is I have a daughter, I have a mom, I have female friends, I have a wife. It's like, so all of it applies to me. But I got to tell you, I probably started out, I think I just sort of started, to be candid with you. I knew I wanted to express myself. I certainly wasn't thinking about monetizing. But I don't think originally I had an intention of what it would look like or who I'd reach. I just started being expressive. And so had I had that, I'd been further along, I think. So can we talk about blogging for a second with you? So you just made a post about this, I think it was yesterday. Do you still post every day?
I post 5 days a week, but here's the thing, and I think this is so important to talk about on your podcast too, and Michael can speak more on this, but I've realized that one, I go where the attention goes, so I evolve and I pivot where I need to pivot. And 2, I think now what you're selling to people is time. So a blog, you have to sit down and you have to read it like this, and it's taking my audience's time. Instagram, you're scrolling through it, it's taking my audience's time. Instagram story, you're watching it, it's taking my audience's time. A podcast is the only medium that I'm completely respecting our audience's time. And with that, it makes Michael and I feel so good that our audience is getting their nails done, they're working out, they're cleaning the kitchen floor while they're learning something that's going to be so productive to their own life.
So let me ask you, I'm going to go back and forth because Michael's got Dear Media, right? And that's sort of managing women that are in this podcast space, right?
Yeah, so we have 30 shows currently under management. We're full service production, distribution. But what I think is important to focus on is that Lauren and I have just been practitioners of this entire media space for so long. And when we saw attention going to audio, we said, okay, listen, this is an opportunity to help people, 1, produce better shows, and 2, make a business out of it. And I think that there's so many people that jump in and say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, but they're not practitioners. And I think I can only take the credit of being in the right place at the right time. It wasn't some great foresight of, I thought and I knew audio. It was just that we were doing it for 3 years, self-producing it, joining a network, going back to self-producing it, learning the ins and outs, struggling to figure out, okay, let's figure a better way to do this.
What works on a podcast? In other words, what gets you traffic? I'm going to ask you about blogging next.
I'll tell you a funny story. I think this is what works on a podcast, and we talked about some of the people offline about who we think are our favorites. My favorite thing is when a known person shows up and they have an entourage of PR people, and the PR people come and they want to sit in the room and they want to stare at Lauren and I like this, and I'm like, listen, you can sit there and stare at us all you like. We're still going to ask the questions because we're not putting the guests first. We're putting our audience first. And what happens when the audience knows that they're your priority and that they're first, that's what builds podcasts. We're not selling something. We're not trying to push an agenda. We're trying to help this audience live a better life or get inspired or whatever it is. And so that's what helps a podcast grow, because they say, hey, cut the BS. These people are serving us. And that's really the intention behind the podcast. So regardless of the PR, regardless of the brands, it's building a service for the audience to get a benefit from.
Mel Gibson always says this, and we talk about this so much, but it's like to educate, to entertain, to inspire. Our content always has to do one of those, and if you can do all 3, you're fucking golden.
Oh God, that's so good.
It's a perfect trifecta. So if you're out there listening and you want to start anything in any medium on social media, I would say to make sure you're getting one of those 3 things in, and if you can do all 3, like I said, you're gold.
How's blogging different? So first off, I want to know, where'd Skinny Confidential come from? Where'd that title come from? And give us a couple tips on blogging that may be different than podcasting.
So the Skinny Confidential has nothing to do with being skinny. It's get the skinny, get the juice. It's a resource. It's always been a resource, and I wanted to get the juice. I didn't want the PR conversation about Jules Huff. I wanted in-depth, specific details of what she's using on her face, what she's eating, what kind. I wanted the real details, not what she's being paid to say. And so that's where it's really getting the skinny.
Okay.
3 blogging tips. I would say don't blog because it's the cool thing to do. And I think you would agree with this with podcasting. And also know yourself. Like, I feel like the self-awareness is really important. For me, I love to write. And what you're gonna get when you read my blog is it's gonna feel like happy hour with me. It's gonna feel like a one-on-one conversation where you're able to learn something. I want people to leave my blog feeling that they can go be the best version of themselves.
Yes.
Not emulating what I'm doing, not copying my formula, just picking up tips and tricks of, you know, something that they can apply to their own life.
Yeah, see, I love that. I want our audience to hear this. So this is such rich stuff. Thank you, by the way. I love that we're getting into stuff that helps the audience, right, immediately. And a lot of people listening, it's like, I'm not sure I want to blog. I don't know that I want to podcast. Clearly, podcasting, I think, is the most valuable space for what you've just said. It can be consumed doing anything. That's one of the great values of it. But I will say to you, I've had a lady sit here named Jasmine Starr. I don't know if you know Jasmine or not, but Jasmine sort of expresses herself with photography. So her social media brand grew through taking pictures, like almost that's her art form. Yours started with a blog that moved into a podcast. Mine started audio, then moved into video. And so there's all different ways. I think it's just what you've said, being authentic to yourself and just starting with some intention of doing those various things. I'm curious about your show and the overall space for both of you. Because I tell people this all the time, if you're gonna do something, do it though. I mean, get into it and have an intention of being great at it. And this is not something you should take, I think, lightheartedly or take casually if you're gonna get into the space of wanting to influence people, right?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I know that it affects me. How do you, if you do, how do you manage the demands? I mean, even a person right here who's got a business, like just coming up with a post every day on Instagram for me is difficult. Or how do you manage that, or do you not? Is it a struggle for both of you?
I am constantly engaging with my audience.
Okay.
So much so that I can tell you what nail polish color she wears, what she's listening to on the ride home, where she works, where she goes to work, how she wears her hair, you know, what she eats for dinner. I actually am bad at returning my personal text messages because I am so in my DMs and my Snapchat DMs and I have a secret Facebook group with 50,000 women in it where we connect and it's community. And I think what ends up happening with that is I listen and I let the audience lead. They are the captain of the ship. I'm sort of helping it, you know, move, but they're driving.
The traditional celebrity never had access to the actual, let's say, fans at the time, right? Like they weren't in communication. I think where people make a mistake in this space once they have platform, first of all, you get platform because you have a vested audience that's interested in what you have to say, right? And so you know what they're interested in what you have to say based on one, the engagement, but two, you interacting with them and asking them, what would you like to see more of? What would you like to see less of? I think the moment creators stop engaging with the people that have given them platform is the moment they start to fall down and start to fall off. Because those are the people that are driving the ship. We always like to describe it as like, you know, they're pointing us and we're just the arrow that's going wherever they want to go.
What about collaborations? How big has that been for you over time of either collaborating on someone else's show, having someone on your own program, something like this today? Has that been, the reason I ask that is I think one of the fastest ways to grow your brand and to grow your following is collaborations. And that could be for people, I want to know it with you. People say, well, I don't know anybody. I'm talking about if you have 300 followers and you collaborate with someone who's got 200 followers and you agree to post something of theirs and they repost something of yours, you're collaborating and you picked up 11 more followers, right? So there's all kinds of ways on every level to collaborate, but how's that? Obviously, you've built this massive movement. I got to assume collaboration had something to do with it.
I've always looked up to Oprah. Oprah is someone, and this is such a cliche answer, but I'm being really honest. Oprah is someone that builds other people up. Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, she builds other people up. And I've noticed sometimes with my industry is that sometimes, you know, that's not happening.
Gosh.
And the foundation of my blog, again, was getting tips and tricks from other people, whether it be the everyday girl or the celebrity or the supermodel or, you know, someone like bringing other people up. I've always really tried to come from an abundance mindset with that. And that it's very Tony Robbins, but it's true. I've never looked at it as scarcity. So even if I did a collaboration with someone, which, you know, this happens all the time, did a podcast with someone and they don't share it, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. It's like, because I'm going to go on to the next one and hopefully they're going to share.
It also comes from a somewhat selfish place, is that we know we don't have all the answers. We know Ed might have some answers we don't have. So what greater benefit to have you come on to our show and ask you whatever we want to ask you for an hour and pick your brain and get that information. And if by chance you share some knowledge with us and our audience learns something, even better. So I think that people that don't want to collaborate in the space are short-sighted, they're short-minded. It always comes around.
So do I.
I believe in karma. I believe in just treating people well. And I think that by putting that positive energy out there, it comes back on. So even if we have someone on and they don't reciprocate, that's okay. We'll have somebody else on, and they will.